Welcome to another video lecture by Utkalp Digital Classes. I am your tutor Raghav Chaturvedi, and today we are going to look at elasticity in the second part. The important topics that I'll try to discuss in this lecture include the Pascal's law, Archimedes principle, fluid dynamics, viscosity, and Stokes law and terminal velocity. Now let's look at the Pascal's law. If the pressure in a liquid is changed at a particular point, the change is transmitted to the entire liquid without being diminished in magnitude. So the Pascal's law can be stated in the following ways. First point says that the pressure in a fluid at rest is same at all points if the gravity is ignored. Pressure of a fluid at rest is the same at all points. At all points. If I ignore gravity. Okay. Next it says that the liquid exerts equal pressure in all directions. So liquids, well, write this properly. Liquids exert equal pressure in all directions. Okay, and the third point says that if the pressure in an enclosed fluid is changed at a particular point, then that change is transmitted to every point of the fluid and to the walls of the container without being diminished in magnitude. Okay, I'll not write this point down. Well, let's see this with a brief example. So the first applications that people generally read about is the hydraulic lift. What happens here? You have a small area here A1, you have a larger area here A2. You have kept, let's say, a truck or a massive body on one of the larger areas. Now for the hydraulic lift, what happens is, let me apply a force F1 on the area A1. Okay, and because of the Pascal's law, the pressure transmitted will be the same as the pressure applied at any point. So if the pressure applied is F1 by A1, the pressure transmitted to the other end will be F2 by A2, which is the same as this. And because F1 by A1 is equal to F2 by A2 by Pascal's law, what we find that the upward force on A2 is nothing but F1 divided by A1 into A2. Next, we will talk about buoyancy and Archimedes principle. So first of all, let us discuss what a buoyant force is. If a body is partially or wholly immersed in a fluid, it will experience an upward force due to the fluid surrounding it. Okay. So if you have a body inside a fluid, let's say, so due to the fluid, that is due to the molecules that are around it, it will be exerted by an upward thrust, and this force will be known as the buoyant force. We'll learn more about this force soon enough. Okay. This brings us to the Archimedes principle. So this principle says that the buoyant force on a body that is partially or totally immersed in a liquid is equal to the weight of the fluid displaced by it. Okay. So if this was my initial body, this was a water body, this was water. Okay. And what you do is, as you've observed before as well, if you drop another body inside it, this water level will rise. Okay, so what this principle is saying is that the magnitude of the force that is being applied on the body in the upward direction, okay, it is equal to the weight of whatever liquid is being displaced. So if the liquid goes from this level to this level, okay, so the weight of this liquid is equal to the magnitude of the force that is being applied on it. Okay, let's see this using this all pre-made diagram for you. So you should consider this as an immersed body Okay, in a liquid, let the density of the liquid be sigma. Sigma is equal to density of liquid. Now look at the top surface. So the top surface of the body is experiencing a downward force. Let me denote it by F1. And what is it equal to? It is A into pressure at 1, area of the surface into pressure at 1. So F1 is equal to A into P1, and what is the pressure at this length? It is equal to rho into H1 into G plus the atmospheric pressure. Similarly, at the lower phase, there is a force F2 on this, that is equal to area into P2 is equal to area into H2 rho G, H2 into sigma G plus P naught. So I can easily write down these forces for you. So F1 is equal to area of the surface into P1, area into P2 is nothing but area into H sigma H1 sigma G plus P naught, and this is H2 sigma G plus P naught. Now you have the forces onto both of the surfaces, and as H2 is greater than H1, so F2 will be greater than F1. If F2 is greater than F1, what is the net upward force on this? So it is equal to F2 minus F1 is nothing but A sigma G into H2 minus H1. Okay, this turns out that force is equal to V sigma into G, because H2 minus H1 will become, let's say, the length L, and when you multiply that length L with the area, you get the volume. So it's the volume of the liquid into the density of the liquid, which will give me the mass of the liquid, into the force of gravity. So you should just mark this as 2 and remember this equation. What is flotation? Sometimes these terms will come into the picture, so you should know what flotation means. So when a body of density rho and volume V is completely immersed in a liquid of density sigma, the forces acting on the body will be given by what all things? There will be a weight on the body, W. Okay, it will be equal to mg is equal to V into rho into G, where rho is the density of the body. Similarly, there will be a buoyant force or a thrust force, you can call it anything. So that upward force will be equal to V into sigma into G, what we have said right now. Now, what is the apparent weight of this body? So apparent weight is equal to W minus the F. Okay, so the apparent weight W minus F. Now there are several cases. So if the density of body is greater than the density of liquid, so if rho is greater than sigma, then what will happen? The body will sink. Okay, so body goes down. What is the case when rho is equal to sigma? When the density of solid is equal to, the density of the body is equal to the density of the liquid. At this point, the apparent weight turns out to be 0, so it floats. And what happens when rho is less than sigma? In that case, the body will float partially submerged in the liquid. Okay, so in this case, the body will move up, and the volume of the liquid displaced by the body will be less than the volume of the body itself. Okay, so you should definitely take these three cases into consideration and try to remember this apparent weight equation. Let's take a look at a question. A wooden block floating in a bucket of water has 4 by 5 of its volume submerged. When certain amount of an oil is poured into the bucket, it is found that the block is just under the oil surface with half of its volume under water and half in oil. The density of oil relative to that of water is given by which of these? So first of all, you should take a note of the initial things that they've given. The block is floating. It has 4 by 5 of its volume submerged. So what do you get from here? First thing that you should note is, whenever you, let's say this is your fluid, initial height was, let's say, L. Now you took a body A, you submerge this in. Now whatever volume that this body A was having, okay, the same volume of water will rise. Okay, so this portion, this extra portion of length delta L will have the same volume as the volume of whatever quantity is completely inside it. So for example, this is the case if the body is there and half of my body is inside it, then this much, the half volume is the volume of the water that has risen. So this volume is equal to the volume that is inside. So volumes will be the same. So volume of the submerged part is equal to the volume of the displaced part. Okay, so this should be clear. Once this is clear, we can approach this question very easily. So it's given that 4/5 of the volume of a wooden block is submerged in water. Now I can use the Archimedes principle easily and find the buoyant force on this. So I have my buoyant force given by 4/5V, which is the volume of the water displaced, into the rho of water or the density of water into G, and this will balance the mass of the block into gravity of the block. So this is your block and there is a buoyant force acting on it, okay, and there is a gravitational force acting on it. But because they have said that the block is floating, so that implies uh, this much mass of the block is being supported. Next, what do we have? You are given the second condition, which says that when certain amount of an oil is poured into the bucket, so when you're trying to pour some oil into the bucket, it is found that the block is just under the oil surface with half of its volume under water and half in oil. So here the block has gone completely under. So if this was your initial water condition, so it initially had uh, 4 by 5 of its volume. This was 4/5 of its volume inside. When you pour some oil, it so happens that it is completely under. But now how are the volumes distributed? The volumes are distributed such that half of its volume, half of this is V by 2 and this is V by 2. This is oil and this is water. So there will be two types of buoyant forces that are acting on it, one due to water and one due to oil. So let's just take a look at those forces. So I have volume by 2 into rho into G, where rho is again for water, plus the second buoyant force is due to oil. So it is again V by 2. Let's call the oil's density as rho of 0 or rho of oil into G. Now this is equal to mg. Okay, because it is floating, so they are balancing out the weight of the block. Now I have two important equations. From these two equations I can easily write that 4/5 of V into rho, where rho is for water, okay, into G is equal to V by 2 into rho into G plus V by 2 into rho naught into G. With this I can easily write that 4/5 rho is equal to rho by 2 plus rho naught by 2. I can easily write this as 4/5 minus half into rho of water is equal to rho naught by 2. That gives me rho 0 divided by rho. Rho was for water, rho naught was for oil. Nothing but 3/5, nothing but 0.6, which is one of the answers that has been given to you. Next, let's talk about fluid dynamics. When a fluid moves in such a way that there are relative motions among the fluid particles, the fluid is said to be flowing. Okay, there are different types of fluid flows, so they can be classified as first of all steady and unsteady flow. So I'll just write them down, and if there is something important from those, then I'll just mention them here as well. There is a steady and unsteady flow. So what is a steady flow? So steady flow is defined as the type of flow in which the fluid characteristics such as velocity, pressure, and density of the velocity, pressure, and density at a point do not change with time. Okay, so they do not change with time, or do not, or I can say they are constant with time. With respect to next is streamline flow. So first of all, you should know that in steady flow, all the particles moving through a given point follow the same path and hence a unique line of flow. And this line of flow will be known as a streamline. Okay. So second thing point is about streamlines. What do you say? What do you have about streamlines? So for example, this is your fluid and these are your particles. Okay. So if there is steady flow, so all the particles that will pass through, let's say this position, okay, they will follow the same path. So for example, this was my path. So the particle which is right now here, if it moves somewhere here and reaches this point, and if this is steady flow, then at this point it will move in the direction that I have marked right here. You should note that these streamlines, they do not intersect each other, because if they will intersect, then then the particle move in either direction at the point of intersection and the flow will not be steady. Next is turbulent and laminar flow. So laminar and turbulent, these are various ways in which you can classify. So what are these? So in laminar flow is defined as the flow in which the fluid particles move along well-defined streamlines which are straight and parallel. So these will be the streamlines when it comes to laminar flow. Okay. In laminar flow, the velocities at different points in the fluid may have different magnitudes, but their directions are parallel. Okay. What about turbulent flow? In turbulent flow, there is an irregular flow in which the particles can move in zigzag ways, due to which the eddies are formed in the fluid and there are high losses. The next one is compressible and incompressible. You will often in every question you will be hearing about these terms, so it's better to have a brief understanding of what these terms mean. Compressible or incompressible. So in a compressible flow, the density of fluid varies from point to point, that is, the density is not constant for the fluid, whereas in incompressible flow, so I'll talk to you about compressible density varies at different points. Okay, and in incompressible this will not happen and the density of the fluid will remain constant throughout. Okay, liquids are generally incompressible while gases are compressible. Next is rotational and irrotational flow. So it's not that essential for the examination, but what is rotational flow? Rotational flow is the flow in which the fluid particles, while flowing along path lines, also rotate about their own axis, and in irrotational flow this does not happen. This brings us to the equation of continuity. So in a steady flow, the mass of a fluid entering into a tube of flow in a particular interval of time is equal to the mass of the fluid leaving the tube. So the first condition that should be validated is steady flow. Only if the question mentions there is a steady flow, you know that you can proceed with these things. So if there is a steady flow, the net mass that is entering per unit time from the left side is equal to the net mass that is flowing outside. Okay, so mass 1 or m1 is equal to m2. That implies I can write first of all m1 is equal to m2. This translates to rho 1. Okay, the density of the fluid at the point 1 is 0.2. Rho 1 into area 1 into velocity 1 is equal to rho 2 into a2 into velocity of 2. That implies a1 v1 is equal to a2 v2. or AV is equal to constant. AV is equal to constant is known as the equation of continuity. So this is something that you should definitely mark. This is because rho 1 is assumed to be equal to rho 2 because we are taking incompressible fluids. Okay, so this is one of the most important topics that you should remember. And the next thing that I will talk to you about is Bernoulli's theorem. So Bernoulli's equation is a mathematical expression of the law of mechanical energy conversion in fluid dynamics, and it will be applied to several fields. So first of all, you should know what is the kinetic energy of a fluid. So I can write my kinetic energy K of a liquid of mass m and volume v flowing with a velocity small v as half into m by v. Sorry, this is the let me write the kinetic energy per unit volume. So we know that kinetic energy is equal to half mv square. Kinetic energy per unit volume is equal to half m by v velocity square, nothing but half rho v square. Okay. Similarly, I can have potential energy, and which is equal to mgh. But what is potential energy per unit volume? So the potential energy, let's say PE, is equal to mgh. Potential energy per unit volume is equal to mgh per unit volume is nothing but rho into g into h. Next, there is something known as the pressure energy. So what is pressure energy? If P is the pressure on an area A of a liquid and the liquid moves through a distance L due to this pressure, then pressure energy is equal to work done. Pressure energy is equal to work done is equal to force into displacement F dot dr. What is force? Force is equal to pressure into area into dr. Okay, is equal to P into A into L. It's nothing but P into V. Okay, so what is the pressure energy per unit volume? So pressure energy, I'll just write this down like this. This was pressure energy, and now we need pressure energy per unit volume. So pressure energy per unit volume is nothing but PV by divided by V is nothing but your value of pressure. So according to the Bernoulli's theorem, which I'll be depicting through this, in case of steady flow of incompressible and non-viscous fluids through a tube of non-uniform cross-section, the sum of the pressure, the potential energy per unit volume, and the kinetic energy per unit volume is same at every point in the tube. Which says that P plus rho gh plus half V square is constant at every point. So whether I take this point 1, this point 2, or any point along the fluid flow, I will always have that P plus rho gh plus half into rho V square is a constant. This will be used in many of the questions. Let's take a look at a question. Water from a tap emerges vertically downwards with an initial speed of 1 meter per second. The cross-sectional area of the tap is 10 to the power minus 4 meter per meter. Let's look at another question. Water from a tap emerges vertically downwards with an initial speed of 1 meter per second. The cross-sectional area of the tap is 10 to the power minus 4 meter square. Assume that the pressure is constant throughout the stream of water and that the flow is streamlined. Then the cross-sectional area of the stream, which is 0.15 meters below the tap, would be given by what? So let me just write the things that are given to you. The velocity given as 1 meter per second. You have your area given to be 10 to the power minus 4 meter square. Okay. Also, you're given the difference in heights, let's say h1 minus h2. I'll just make the diagram of this so this is easier for you to understand. This is your tap. It's written that water from this is emerging downwards. Okay, the cross sectional area of the tap is given to be A. Okay, and the speed is given to be V here initially. Now you're assuming that the pressure is constant throughout the stream of water and that the flow is streamlined. So this water that is flowing downwards, okay, you are assuming this to be streamlined. The cross sectional area, now you want to find the cross sectional area of the stream, 0.15 meter below the tap. 0.15 meter below the tap. Let the velocity here be V prime and area here be A prime. Okay, now H1 minus H2 is given to be 0.15 meter. With this in mind, I need to find V prime and A prime. Now using the Bernoulli's theorem, I have P plus half rho V square plus rho G H1 is equal to P plus half rho V prime square plus rho G H2. Now because both the pressures are same, it's given in the question as well, so you can easily eliminate these. So I have what is left, half into V square plus G into H1 is equal to half into V prime square plus G into H2. This gives us that V prime square is nothing but V square plus 2G H1 minus H2. Okay, now H1 minus H2 is already given to you here at 0.15 meter. So I have that my V prime square is nothing but 1 square plus 2 into 10 into 0.15 is nothing but 2 meter per second. So I use the Bernoulli's principle here. Now I want to compare the areas and velocities at 2 points. So I can easily use the equation of a continuity, which says that AV is equal to A prime V prime. Okay, so A prime is nothing but AV divided by V prime. If I just substitute the values, I find that this is equal to half into 10 to the power minus 4, nothing but 5 into 10 to the power minus 5 meter square. Next, we talk about the Torricelli's law of efflux. So using the Bernoulli's theorem and the equation of continuity, we can evaluate the velocity of the fluid flowing out at a point B in a container, okay, when the fluid has been filled to a point capital H. Okay, so if you apply Bernoulli's theorem at 2 points, let's say here and at this point, and then you use the equation of continuity, which is A1 V1 is equal to A2 V2, then you can easily find that the velocity at B is nothing but root 2 times G into small h, where small h is the length from the top to the point where you have made a hole in the system. Okay, so note that this equation is same as that of a freely falling body after falling through h height and is known as the Torricelli's law. Now you can easily write the equation of uniformly accelerated motion in vertical direction, okay, because this is just like a projectile motion. So how much height is left? H minus h height is left for it to travel. Okay, so you can easily write this as h minus h is equal to 0 plus half gt square. Okay, which will give you the time. Which will give you the time t is equal to time of fall 2 into h minus h into divided by g. And using this, I can easily find the horizontal range, which is Vx into t is equal to root 2gh into this quantity right here, which gives me root of 2 times root of small h into capital H minus small h. Okay, now you need to find when will there be the range maximum value, or take the maximum value. So range will be maximum when r square is maximum. So you need to find d by dr square by dh is equal to 0. That happens when r turns out to be equal to h. Okay, so the maximum range is equal to h. H was your height of the entire thing, and your velocity at b is equal to root 2 times g into small h. So these two things I think you should remember. Even if you don't remember this, you can easily apply the Bernoulli's theorem and the equation of continuity to find these values out. Okay, because you need to apply the Bernoulli's theorem at this height. So there will be rho g h here. Okay, and then because it's coming out of here, you have the kinetic energy and the potential energy. So using those, you can easily find this value. Let's look at a question. The top of a water tank is open to air. So we'll make a water tank here first of all. The top is open to air and its water level is maintained. It is giving out 0.74 meter cube water per minute through a circular opening of 2 centimeter radius in its wall. So there is an opening right over here of 2 centimeter and it is giving out water. Here there is only the atmospheric pressure being applied. Okay. Now what they are asking us about the depth of the center of the opening. So depth of the center of the opening from the level of water in the tank. So we want to find this thing out. First of all, how do I approach this question? Let me use what is given in the question. So they've given the rate of volume flow, or the volumetric flow rate. The volumetric flow rate is 0.74 divided by 60. So this is per second. And what is this equal to? It is equal to the area of whatever the break that I have in the system or in the wall into the velocity of fluid that is coming out. I already know the expression for velocity of fluid, so I can first write this as 4 into the velocity of fluid. Okay, where this is the height h. So I can transpose the things to the left side and write that 2gh root over 2gh is nothing but 740 by 24 pi. 24 pi. Okay, I can then find 2gh from here. 2gh is nothing but 740 into 740 divided by 24 into 24 into pi square. Okay, and I know I can use, in order to simplify the calculation, that pi square is close to the value of 10. So I can substitute for pi square as 10. Okay, now I just try to find the value of h now. So h is what? First of all, this 2g will also go here. So this will become into 2 into 10. Okay, you can cancel 2 tens with this. This gives me 74. H is equal to 74 into 74 divided by 24 into 24 into 2, which is similar to 4.8 meter. That is, the depth of the center of the opening from the level of water in the tank is close to 4.8 meter. So is it there? Yeah, the second one is the option. Viscosity is the property of the fluid, liquid or gas, by virtue of which it opposes the relative motion between its adjacent layers. So it is something similar to the fluid friction that we've been talking about, or internal friction of the fluid. So it is a tangential force first of all, and it is an internal force which will try to retard the relative motion between the layers. Now this brings us to the Newton's law of viscosity. And what does it say? It says that the if there are, let's say, two layers, layer 1 and layer 2 in front of you, we'll call them PQ and RS, and they are at a distance y from each other. They are at a distance y from the bottom, sorry, and there is a distance delta y between these two layers of fluid. Thus, I can easily write uh, the change in velocity in the perpendicular direction in the delta y direction as delta Vx. So let the change of velocity in the perpendicular direction be equal to delta Vx. Okay. Now the rate of change of velocity with distance perpendicular to the direction of flow, which will be delta Vx by delta y. Okay, this will be known as your velocity gradient. First of all, you should know what the velocity gradient is. Okay, so this is actually a fluid, and what this is meaning is velocity at this point, and you're comparing this point to, let's say, a point over here or a point over here or a point over here. So all these will have a different velocities, and these velocities depend on how far you are from, let's say, the edge of the system. Okay, so I have with me the velocity gradient. Next, according to Newton, the viscous force F, which acts between these two layers, is proportional to the contact area of these two. It is proportional to the velocity gradient that I just told you about. Okay, and he just and when you write this proportionality and you do some experiments, it turns out that you get a coefficient which will be known as the coefficient of viscosity of a fluid. Okay. And your equation is nothing but F is equal to, or the viscous force between two layers is equal to eta into A into delta Vx by delta y. So I think you should make a small note of this here. So how is the coefficient of viscosity defined? So the coefficient of viscosity, or eta, of the fluid is defined as the viscous force per unit area of contact between two layers having unit velocity gradient. Let's talk about Stokes' law in terminal velocity. Stokes showed that if a small sphere of radius r is moving with a velocity v through a homogeneous medium with which has a coefficient of viscosity eta, then the viscous force acting on the sphere is nothing but force of viscous equal to 6 pi into eta into radius into v. Okay, this is an important law. It is known as the Stokes law. So next we talk about what is terminal velocity. So when a solid sphere is falling in a liquid, let's say this is your tube. You might have done this experiment in your labs as well. This is your tube filled with, let's say, some liquid. Okay, and the liquid has the coefficient of viscosity as eta. You have a small ball of radius r, and it is trying to drop through this. So when the solid sphere is falling in this liquid, then its accelerating velocity is controlled by the viscous force of liquid. So this was my mass into g, and there was a buoyant force, and then there is a viscous force as well. Okay. There is a viscous force as well on this body. As I've shown here, the upthrust, which was my buoyant force, is given by the volume. So 4 by 3 pi r cube is the volume into density of liquid into acceleration due to gravity. Weight is 4 by 3 pi r cube, volume into density into gravity, and you have a force which is equal to 6 pi into eta into r into velocity. Now if I just equate these and try to find the condition when there is no acceleration on the body, I will have my th plus Fv is equal to my weight. Okay, when I just substitute the values of all the three there, I find that the velocity, which will be known as the terminal velocity, okay, Vt is nothing but sum 2 by 9 into r square rho minus sigma into g by eta. Okay, so this will be my terminal velocity. So when the body has no acceleration on it, it will start moving with a constant velocity, okay, and that velocity will be known as the terminal velocity of the body. So it will accelerate till, let's say, some point in the fluid till here, and after this point the forces will start to balance each other, okay, and when they start to balance each other, at that point the velocity will become a constant. A solid sphere of radius r acquires a terminal velocity v1 when falling due to gravity through a viscous fluid having a coefficient of viscosity eta. The sphere is broken into 27 identical solid spheres. If each of these spheres acquires a terminal velocity v2 when falling through the same fluid, the ratio v1 by v2 is equal to what? First of all, you can easily find the formula for the terminal velocity by using the three forces that are there. Just balance the forces, which is mg. Then you have the buoyant, and you have the force of uh, due to viscosity. Okay, so these are the three forces. If you just balance them, you'll get the value of the terminal velocity. Now I can just write the formula for terminal velocity, which is 2 by 9 into r square by eta into rho naught minus rho of liquid into g. Okay, from here you can easily see that my Vt is proportional to radius square. Now since mass of the sphere will be the same when you try to break it, so I just equate the masses initially. So initially my mass was 4 by 3 pi r cube, and finally I broken it down into 27 pieces. 27 into 4 by 3 pi into small r cube rho is same for both, which will give me that small r is equal to capital R by 3. Okay, so this was your initial sphere, and these are your smaller spheres. These are your smaller spheres of radius small r. This is the capital one of radius capital R. Using this, I can easily use my relation that I have provided you here. So v1 by v2 is nothing but r square by small r square, is nothing but 9. The last definition that I wanted to present to you was that of Reynolds number, which is denoted by Re. So the type of flow pattern, whether it is laminar or turbulent, is determined by a non-dimensional number called Reynolds number. It is defined as rho, which is the density of the fluid, into v, which is the mean speed, d, which denotes the diameter of the obstacle or boundary of fluid flow, and eta is the viscosity. Okay, so you should definitely remember this formula and what these terms mean. So for your consideration, I'll just write them down again. So rho is equal to density of the liquid or fluid. You have eta is equal to viscosity coefficient. You have v as the mean speed of fluid flow. And you have d as the diameter of boundary of the fluid flow. So you should remember these things. And how do you say which type of flow is there? So if Re is less than 1000, you say that it is laminar. If it is greater than 2000, it is called turbulent. and if it is between 1000 to 2000, it may be laminar or it may be turbulent. This is one classification that is important from the examination point of view. Let's take a look at this question. Water from a pipe is coming at a rate of 100 liters per minute. If the radius of the pipe is 5 centimeter, the Reynolds number for the flow is of the order of which of these four? Okay. So first of all, you are given with the discharge of water. Let us call that Q. So the discharge of water, or I'll just write this down properly. The discharge of water, they're given by 100 liters per minute. It's nothing but 0.1 divided by 60 meter cube per second. Okay, because 1 liter is equal to 1 liter is equal to 10 to the power minus 3 meter cube. With this in mind, they've given you the radius of the pipe. I can write the radius in meter as well, 0.05 meter. Okay, and cross sectional area A is pi r square, is nothing but 3.14 into 0.05 square. With these things out of the question, and I need to calculate the velocity of flow, because Reynolds number depends on the velocity of flow. So what is the velocity of flow? Velocity of flow is given by the discharge rate divided by the area. So first of all, you should definitely take this down. Okay, so I can write my velocity of flow as 0.1 divided by 60 into 3.14 into 25 into 10 to the power minus 4. Okay, this turns out to be 0.21 meter per second. Now I can use the formula for the Reynolds number. So the Reynolds number is given as rho Vd divided by eta. So I can just substitute the values. Rho was given as 1000 into velocity is 0.21, 10 into 10 to the power minus 2, where 10 is the diameter, and then you're converting it to meter cube or meters, divided by 10 to the power minus 3. This gives me that my Reynolds number turns out to be 2.1 into 10 to the power 4, or we can say that the order is equal to 10 to the power 4. Let us take a look at another question. A vertical U-tube of uniform cross section contains mercury in both arms. Now this black thing is mercury, okay, which is Hg. A glycerin of relative density 1.3, column of length 10 centimeters is introduced into one of the arms. So this is your glycerin. Okay, GLY is your glycerin. Oil of density 800 kg per meter cube is poured into the other arm. Is oil. Okay, until the upper surface of the oil and glycerin are at the same horizontal level. So they are at the same horizontal level now. Find the length of the column. The density of mercury is given as 13.6 into 10 to the power 3 kg per meter cube. Now as you know that this is given to be 10 centimeter, and A and B are at the same horizontal level. So if 2 points are at the same horizontal level, that implies the pressure at both the points must be the same. So I have to write my pressure at A is equal to the atmospheric pressure. The atmospheric pressure is applied here and it is applied here as well. So pressure at A is atmospheric pressure plus the pressure due to the liquid on top of it. So it is P0 plus 0.1 into 1.3 into 10 to the power 3 into acceleration into gravity. This is your density, because relative density was given with respect to water, it was given. So this 1.3 into 10 to the power 3, because I am writing it in terms of kg per meter cube, and then 0.1 is nothing but 10 centimeter. Similarly, I can write it for P. Now B has the pressure, atmospheric pressure plus pressure due to two types of columns on top of it. So what is the pressure at B? Pressure at B can be written as P0 plus H into 800 into G plus 0.1 minus H into 13.6 into 1000 into G. Now because pressure at A is equal to pressure at B, I can easily write that 0.1 into 13.6 or 1300 nothing but 800H plus 0.1 minus H into 13600. This reduces my value of H to 0.096 meter or 9.6 centimeter.